Thanks for joining the session. I'm very honored to be here. This is a talk that's very dear to my heart about how survivorship bias can affect us women in tech, especially in cloud native. I'm Imma Valls. I'm a staff developer advocate at Grafana Labs. So I'm also a passionate community builder. This is what to expect from this presentation. We'll have some stats about the landscape of women in tech and in cloud native. What are the barriers of entry and retention? What is survivorship bias for the ones who don't know? And how intersectionality and survivorship bias can interact, and how to build diverse and inclusive communities. So this is actually the first stats that surprised me, because from experience, I know that a lot of women around 30, 35 leave tech. And most of them also go into management and leave technical jobs. And I actually found some stats that say that 50% of women who take a tech role actually leave at the age of 35, 45% more than men, and 20% more than in other jobs. So something was going on. I didn't understand this because I've been in tech for more than 25 years, so I did not understand why. So in cloud native, it's very difficult to find some stats, but there is a World Economy survey, I think, that says that in cloud, it's only 14% of women. So compared to engineering, where we have 20% of the workforce, and in AI, it seems we have a little bit more, 32%. So I guess this is even probably worse in cloud native. And also trying to find stats on KubeCon and Cloud Native Con, what we see is that we actually have a lot of representation in women speakers, but if you look at attendees, when I'm in the halls of a KubeCon, I don't see a lot of women. So these stats probably show that there's not a lot of women attending. Even if we have enough representation probably in speakers, we don't have women attending, and that's something also I did not understand because I usually attend. So what are the barriers of entry and retention? I guess mostly what we see in tech, there's a pay gap. Women, usually we get paid more for the same roles. There's a lack of opportunities sometimes for women. There's the environment, sometimes it's not as safe as we would like it to be. So there's a lot of issues that can be actually a barrier for entry and retention that we have experienced ourselves. And this comes from usually what I hear, because I'm an organizer in one of the conferences we have in a community in Barcelona. And we used to be like 50% of women in the organization, and now it's none, it's all men. I'm leaving this year. And when I talk to people in the organization, why don't you have women? They say, oh, this is a meritocracy. If they don't join, it's because they don't want to join. We are not preventing them from joining. So I find this is a very interesting way of understanding that the system is not the right one. I mean, for some people, even if we give them the right tools, like give them the same ladder, if the system is skewed, it doesn't help. Even if we change the tools and we address this inequality, it's not always enough. I mean, we have to create a system that is just, that you know that the tree now is straight. So this is what we have to do, I think. So we need to focus on this systemic justice to fix these issues. So this is, I've asked some of my friends about how they feel in tech. For example, I have a friend of mine who says that she changed the GitHub profile so that it would look neutral, and that helped. So instead of having a profile that says I'm a woman, she changed it to a neutral profile, and that helped. Or other things that can happen is that you feel that you are the only woman in the room, and it can feel exhausting because you don't feel identified, or you can feel that if you speak up, people will say, they will not trust you, you think that you're making a mistake, so it doesn't help that we don't feel that we have this support, and it's not a safe space for us sometimes. So I don't know, who knows what survivorship bias is? Have you heard of that? 1, 2, not a lot of many people. So when thinking about that, I was thinking of myself, because I survived in tech, and I was thinking, why did I survive and other women did not survive? And I found this concept of survivorship bias, which is in World War II. What they did is they analyzed the aircrafts that made it to base, that survived. And they were thinking, we need to improve the aircrafts, we need to protect them somewhere, so more aircrafts get back to base. And the first thing they thought is, okay, we're going to protect the places where the airplanes that get it to base got shot. But actually, if you think of it, the pilot that is in there, in the cabin, is not protected. So probably if we shot the pilot, the aircraft goes down. So what they end up seeing is that they needed to protect the places where the aircrafts that did not get to base were actually shot. So for example, if the pilot is shot, the airplane goes down. So this is a little bit of the same. The concept applied to many things. If we're looking at a data set that it's not complete, we're only looking at the survivors. When we analyze what we need to do to get more people to join and stay in tech, we might be missing the women that did not make it and why they did not make it. So it's the same thing. We need to analyze not only the survivors, but most especially the ones that don't survive or leave tech. And for me, that was difficult because, of course, I survived, and it was very difficult to think, how do I know when I'm doing something, like when I decide to help in a way, if this is the right way, because I'm focused on my own experience. I'm an engineer. I have certain privileges. So for me, what helped a lot was recognizing intersectionality. Of course, I'm a woman. But intersectionality acknowledges that individuals have multiple overlapping social identities. And this wheel is very useful for me because it's a framework that allows me to see what are my privileges and what are not my privileges. So the closer you are to the center, the more privileges you have. So some social identities that we have apart from gender, it's race, it's the class, it's studies that you have, it's how advanced you are in your career. You can be starting, you can be mid-career. So for me, this is a framework that actually helps me a lot when I try to decide if I'm doing something that will help these women that don't join or don't stay in tech, if this is going to help. For example, this is my case, no? I could be staying saying, oh, I survived, so anyone can survive. But of course, I have a lot of privileges. Maybe I'm a woman, but I'm an engineer, I'm a citizen, I'm not a migrant, I'm a white European, I don't have children or family to take care of, so there's a lot of things that actually help me. And when I look at other women who survive my age, a lot of them have similar characteristics. So they have an engineering degree, they don't have children, so they are not migrants. So all of things were like that. So that's actually something I find very useful. And it changed a little bit how I was helping. For example, I was mentoring women who had studied at the same university as me, had the same engineering degree. And then I decided to change that and say, hey, maybe I need to help women who don't have an engineering degree and who are migrants, because this is a very different case. So probably I can help more if I do that than if I mentor women who have the same privileges I have. Of course, they still have discrimination, but the amount of discrimination they have is way less. So finally, why do we want to build diverse and inclusive communities? So, we all know that probably. Diversity is inviting different people to contribute. And inclusion is making sure that it's a safe space and they feel welcome there. So always keeping systemic justice in mind, if you recall the image you had before, because this is what we need to work on. Why? Because, of course, the communities will be more sustainable. Innovation, we know, is better if the teams are diverse. We'll build better software. So all of this is a thing that we can work on. These are concrete things I think we can work on. There's a lot more that we can suggest. For example, for me as a survivor, I always went to conferences. I didn't care. I felt, even if it was not maybe the safest space for me, or I didn't feel recognized because it was all guys usually, I didn't care. But I know that if we have a code of conduct, even if I never needed it, it helps. So now what I think of when I organize a conference or a community is to make very clear that we have a code of conduct, how you can report this code of conduct, because it's important. And I find this video from Lian Li very interesting because she says things like, at a conference, if you want to really enforce a code of conduct, don't just have a code of conduct and reach out to that person. If that person is not a dedicated person to the code of conduct, the problem is that person is doing catering or is doing registration as well. If someone goes there to report something, that person is busy. So it might just not be reported. So it's important to have, for example, a dedicated team, to have them trained so they know what they have to do in case something happens. So I think that, for example, she gives a lot of very interesting pointers. And there's a training and some scenarios that I think are very interesting to have a look at. Other important thing for me, again, as a survivor, I didn't feel that I needed inclusive language to survive in tech. But of course, after 25 years, I recognize it's important. Using gender-neutral language, like when people say guys, I don't feel identified with guys. I'm a woman. Use the correct pronouns from everyone. Be sensitive to cultural differences, because now, like 6 years ago, I started working at a multinational company. We have people in different countries. And actually, then I learned, hey, different countries have different culture, and you cannot not expect the same thing from everyone. And if you look at intersectionality, you'll recognize there are loaded words. Like for me, blacklist is not a problem, but it might trigger someone who is black. So we can try to change these words. So there's a lot, if you go to this URL, you'll find a lot of words that we can change. Of course, as a survivor, I can say, hey, I survived, why do we need to change that? People can actually just ignore that. But it's not like that. It's not about how do you feel, it's how the other person feels. So it's not about you, it's about the others. So if we are empathic with people, that actually helps. Another thing that we do a lot is feedback. I see a lot of pull requests that actually say, that's why actually my friend changed her profile on GitHub. Because we get like, sometimes after a pull request, we get that, this is wrong, yeah, but this is not correct feedback. We need to explain what would you change? Why do you consider this is wrong? So if we take that into account, giving correct feedback is a good thing that we need to learn. And we need to create this psychological safety where everyone is able to ask stupid questions if it's necessary. Stupid question can lead to a very interesting point at some point. So we need to create this safe space where everyone can ask anything and everyone feels welcome. And working at Grafana, we actually use the culture map when we start, and it's very interesting because it shows you how different cultures understand things differently. So for example, in my country, I gain trust by knowing you, by having coffee with you, by going to lunch with you, but my manager is from the US, and he's more task-oriented. So he trusts you once he can see that you do the task that he assigned to you correctly. So knowing the differences is also important when we deal with people, because they have different cultures and that can have different contexts. And of course, again, mentoring. I never had a mentor, but that doesn't mean it's not necessary. So again, I think if you come from a survivorship, with the survivorship bias, it's like, well, I survived without a mentor, but it's important to have someone that can actually be with you, make it easy for you, especially if it's someone you recognize yourself with. For example, if you're a woman, having a woman mentor you, it really helps because, well, we have something in common for sure. So I would recommend going to these links. There's a group of women in cloud native. There's resources for mentorship in open source. And I think tomorrow a lot of speakers will share this slide because one of the tasks at the CNCF is starting to offer mentorship, and they are looking for mentors. So the more diverse mentors they have, the better. So I really, I will apply for that. I will offer to help. And I really encourage you to help them as well. And to take home, as I was saying, work with empathy. I mean, talk to people that have different experiences. For me, for example, I don't have children. I talk to women that have children, and men also. Why don't you go to a conference? Well, because I have kids and I don't have a childcare service. So you can actually, if you can, in your conference, add childcare services. So if you listen to other people's experiences, you might learn what are the barriers for them that maybe you don't experience. So the one thing I try to do now is listen to migrant women, to what are the problems that you face and how can we help? Because otherwise I just think, no, for me everything works. I used to work, for example, I wasn't able to bring myself to work when I was younger. I used to work with guys, so they always talk of football. So I ended up learning a lot about football. I don't care about football at all. I was an expert. Every Sunday I was listening to the radio, and on Monday I could go to coffee with them and feel one of the team. So we need to change that. So you have to be able to bring yourself to the communities, to work, and be yourself. So that's one thing I think if we listen to other people, it's easier to achieve that, and people will feel more comfortable. I also have another anecdote here that's very interesting. Like maybe 20 years ago, I was working in a team of all guys, like 20 guys, and I was talking to a friend of mine from university, and I was like, well, you know, in my team, we are all guys. And she said, no, that's not true. I was like super angry. How do you know this is not true? I work there and you don't. Because you're a woman. I said, wow, that's true, I'm a woman. So I just fit in because I wanted to belong to the team, but that should not be necessary, and it's up to us to make it not necessary, and be welcome to everyone. So these are the slides, if anyone wants to download them. And questions, which is my favorite part, if there's any.
So I like what you said about having the dedicated person for the events, for the code of conduct. I've run a lot of meetups in the past, and the code of conduct, in the last few years has been something that I've thought about that I didn't used to think about in the past. But meetups are generally very small events, and it's hard to have a dedicated person for that because frequently it's just one person, organizing and running the events. Do you have any advice for that sort of situation?
Yeah, I would say because sometimes they want to report you, for example. So there should be, for example, somewhere else, an email they can write, for example, in the cloud native community, they can reach out to the CNCF. So I always make sure in the meetups that we say, hey, we can reach out to us if something happens. We're not dedicated. But if anything happens, there's a way to reach out to the CNCF and report that. So at least that helps a little bit. But yeah, for meetups, it's a little bit difficult because sometimes we are one or two on each meetup organizing. And I was probably thinking more of big conferences. My previous employee, we did that. Actually, I was one of the people in charge of the code of conduct. I didn't understand it at the time. I was a dedicated person with someone else for the conference, and we didn't do anything else. We were just points of contact, and that really helped, I think. But yeah, for me, that's probably a good question, but I don't have a solution.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it'd be nice. We try to do that, just say, hey, there's a way that you can report that. If I'm not listening to you because I'm busy doing this and that, you can always go and report the CNCF.
Hello, question here. First of all, thanks for the presentation, Imma, and also being in the community, not only here, in Spain as well. So I have a question about the survivor bias, because the other day discussing with my mom, she asked me about, parity in my work, and the numbers weren't very good. So this survivor bias, have you found any study where other career paths where maybe women are more representative are asked why they took that instead of engineering or IT? Because usually I see that the point of focus is why there are not many women in IT, but other career paths like education where it's more representative, like 80%, 90%, nobody says, okay, so the problem has two sides. So there is also less men, why they took that and not engineering. So sometimes the point of focus is in IT, there are no women, but in other places, it's different.
If you look at nurses, all of the nurses are usually women.
Like nursery or education. In Spain, it's usually it's more women there,
I think
but the focus is in IT.
I think this goes to education, and if you go to the UNESCO, they have very good reports on education side of things, and they address all the diversity issues in different sectors. It's not just tech. They say, okay, there's no parity in different sectors, and they have actually points on how to improve things. But I think it's very cultural why women study nursing, because we are caregivers, and why we don't study tech is because we think it's difficult, it's not something women should do. I don't know. That's what I was told when I was about to study engineering. They told me, why are you studying engineering? Is this something that women don't study? I didn't know. But yeah.
And this is something that I saw the other day also, that in IT didn't got the engineering title on it, and when they put engineering to it, the rate of women dropped by half. So this is something that I saw on LinkedIn some days ago, and it was like, why? Just by changing the name?
It
People is
sounds like,
scared?
I think it's a cultural thing. It sounds like men should study engineering. Like now, doctors, there's a lot of women doctors. And it's also a very difficult career and very long one. But probably engineering is a term that scares women culturally because of the way we are brought up, probably. I don't know. Also, some countries have different ratios as well. Some countries are worse than others. So probably something with the upbringing that we need to address probably when they are young, 8, 10, 12 years old. It's when women usually stop STEM, they decide they're not going to study STEM careers. So.
Well, I hope more women are there, so we have people to reference. And
I find UNESCO has
everything.
very interesting stuff on that, because it's a part of the education that they really work on that, on the gender gap that is in general everywhere.
I'll run. We have some fantastic women examples in engineering, civil engineering in London, that have done fantastic big projects here. So when you're out and about, some of those projects have been led by women.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the presentation, super inspiring. Sometimes when these topics come up, one of the things that, well, I'd like to hear if you have some examples of situations where you felt included. You know, like there's a lot of examples and a lot of talks about the things that are happening where the opposite is the case, but sort of like, do you have like a good example of a story of, you know, a positive interaction or a situation where, yeah.
Pretty sure probably a lot. I do appreciate allies, for example, because women sometimes in the room, when you say something, you feel like no one is listening. But if there's an ally in the room, it's gonna talk for you and say, hey, she already said that. So for me, that helps a lot. And yeah, having a facilitator that actually sees that women sometimes, we don't dare to speak up, and actually looks at, hey, who has spoken so far? Or there's a woman who hasn't spoken. And trying to offer her the opportunity to speak, that has helped me a lot, because I was very shy also in meetings and everywhere. So if I didn't have someone who said, hey, Imma, do you have anything to say? If you say no, that's okay. But I think that allies help a lot in that. And I had very good experiences recently, to be honest, compared to 20 years back. I think it has changed a lot, but yeah, there's still room to improve, for sure.
Hello. One thing you mentioned during your talk was the meritocracy argument. I instinctively know it's nonsense when somebody says, oh, the reason there's only one woman in the team is because it's a meritocracy. It's, aside from saying you're talking bollocks and shutting that person down.
It's not very good argument, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. What is the best way of us actually trying to demonstrate how rubbish that statement is?
I find it very difficult. Sometimes I try to counteract the argument and because sometimes they say, no, but we hired this woman and she's terrible. Didn't we ever hire a guy that was terrible? And do you say that this is because it was a guy? No. So meritocracy is also, I also now bring intersectionality into the conversation. Like, hey, some people have a lot of added problems, not just being a woman. So we need to be really careful about that. Because some people are not aware. People just think of privilege like you have it or you don't have it. But this wheel of privilege, actually, if you build it for yourself, it's very useful because you find that you have privileges and you have things that are not a privilege. Everyone has things that can cause discrimination. And whenever I show this wheel, actually, it has helped a lot to people don't feel like very confrontational, like it's about men and women. No, it's about a compound of discrimination, potential discriminatory things, but everyone has it. Like maybe someone doesn't speak English, so that in our sector is a problem. So guys also sometimes don't speak English. So it's something that when you bring that into play, I feel that they understand it a little better. Like it's not just about black and white. There's shadows in there. And if you can identify with some discrimination, then you can probably understand others. But I usually try to do that now. But before I discovered this, I didn't know how to do it.
Hey, Imma, thank you for the presentation. One thing really spoke to me is this difference between radical candor and brutal honesty. I was involved in a code of conduct thing lately. I thought I was radically candid, but turns out I was brutally honest. Do you have an example? Can you clarify the difference? Because for me, I'm still learning.
I don't know. I think it's a way to say it. Like if you're brutally honest, and I don't have a concrete example right now, but I think there's a difference between being just brutally honest and say, I don't like this, and trying to explain, hey, what do you think about this and that? Because when you make very concrete statements, sometimes you're very brutal, very direct. And sometimes it's also very cultural. Some cultures are very direct. I'm Spanish, I'm not that direct. So the ways I will say things are not as harsh. So I guess it's finding the balance. Also, that's why culture map is important, because if you're in the same culture, probably you're okay. Because some cultures are very direct, and they understand this. But when I talk, for example, from people from the Netherlands, you are more direct with feedback. And for Spanish people, that is like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything else because he told me that. And the way you told me, for your culture is perfect probably, but for my culture it's not. So trying to be, probably adjust to the cultures a little bit more. And feedback is just to help improve. It's not just to say, hey, this is wrong. No, this is wrong, no. I saw this, maybe I would suggest doing that. What do you think? Sometimes try that the other person arrives to the conclusion without telling them. So great facilitators I've seen are people who don't tell you what to do, but they ask you a question. And then you think, oh, yes, this is what I should say, or this is what I think. But if people tell you directly something, you don't reach the same conclusion yourself, and you might be like, oh, okay, it's very direct, and I don't agree.
If it helps, I know that I have that problem when I communicate over text. So when I do things at work, it's much harder for me in the open source world, but when I'm able to communicate over voice, so hopping on a video chat, I don't have that same problem as I do when I do it over Slack or something like that. And so sometimes if you find yourself having that sort of problem where people think you're being brutally honest versus candid, let them see your face. And so sometimes that personal connection can make a big difference.
And the other thing made me think now with ChatGPT and the likes, I do that a lot. Sometimes I want to say something to a user in our forum who's not being polite. I go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to tell this user this is not right. They are not following the code of conduct. But I want to say it in a way that's polite and that they don't feel attacked. And it proposes an email that's super nice. I say, oh, that's really nice. I wouldn't write that. So before that, it was difficult. But now for me, at least I try to use these tricks and say, hey, okay, I would like to say this is not correct, but how do I say it? So if you cannot speak in person. Make it polite. That's a good plugin that you can do.
Awesome, Mina. Thank you very much.
Thank you.